Hello, my name is Megan. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to do a book review. A non-spoilery book review. I have never done a non-spoilery book review before, so God help us. Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller, which I read as an e-arc from NetGalley, which I got in exchange for an honest review. And so here is my honest review. I'm going to start by reading the synopsis of this book. Salet Leon is a thief, and a good one at that, but gender-fluid Sal wants nothing more than to escape the drudgery of life as a highway robber and get closer to the upper class and the nobles who destroyed their home. When Sal Leon steals a poster announcing open auditions for the Left Hand, a powerful collection of the Queen's personal assassins, named for the rings she wears, ruby, emerald, amethyst, and opal, their world changes. They know it's a chance for a new life. Except the audition is a fight to the death, filled with clever circus acrobats, lethal apothecaries, and vicious ex-soldiers. A childhood as a common criminal hardly prepared Sal for the trials, but Sal must survive to put their real reason for auditioning into play: revenge. That sounds pretty awesome, don't it? It sounds kind of neat. It certainly sounds a little bit better than it actually is. As the synopsis says, our main character, Sal, is auditioning, basically, to become a part of the Queen's Left Hand, which is named for the rings that she wears. This is not a ruby. This is not red, but we're going to pretend it's ruby. And this, I'm sure the Queen has better rings than these cheap little flower rings that I have. They are auditioning for Opal, who has just died, so there's auditions for a new Opal. These assassins wear masks and sort of shed their former identity and their former personal lives to be the Queen's left hand. I'm mostly sure this is my left hand. I'm not completely sure. And Sal finds a poster when they're robbing a noble lady along the road. They find this poster for the auditions, and so they decide to go audition. And honestly, I'm gonna say, Sal is not qualified for the job that they are auditioning for. They are not at all qualified. That is what they are doing. So there's 23 other auditioners for this position. They all wear masks, and they're just known by their numbers because as they're auditioning, they sort of give up their name and stuff for the time being, assuming that they don't die. So it sort of begins with them, trying to kill each other. And that sounds pretty cool. It sounds a bit Hunger Games-y, but it's not as cool as it sounds. I'm gonna say it. It's not as exciting as it sounds. See, I enjoy a good competition in a book. I like books with a competition angle, or trials, or tests, that kind of stuff. It's always fun. In this case, it wasn't that fun. It wasn't. The stakes never felt particularly high. I never really cared about the outcome of the auditions. I never cared. I mean, people died, other people didn't die. Sal, our main character, is gender fluid. They're a thief. They go by she, him, or they, depending on how they dress. So I'm going to mostly use they pronouns to describe them. And Sal is a thief, a highway robber. That's what they've done all their lives. They're an orphan from this country that was destroyed by, these shadows that were created by, magicians. I'm not sure what magical people are called in this book. I can't remember. But basically years ago, or not that many years ago, their country, their homeland was destroyed by this magic, and then this new queen popped up and she sort of eradicated all magic, so there's no more magic anymore. They're one of the last people surviving from this country, so they want revenge on these nobles of this other country because their troops and soldiers withdrew from their country, sort of leaving them at the mercy of these shadows, and they're still pissed about that because their whole family died, so that's kind of understandable. But I gotta say, the revenge aspect was also kind of awkward, I would say. It was probably one of the more interesting aspects of this book. I tend to prefer when the bad guys have a little depth to them. I prefer my bad guys to have depth to them, but ultimately this book, in general, didn't have a whole lot of depth to it. this book sort of lacked the depth that I wanted, or that I would expect from a fantasy book that I would enjoy. I like depth in my books, basically, and this book didn't have that. It was fast-paced in a way that it felt like it was sort of just going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And, like, there were some times where I cared about what was happening, but most of the time I kind of didn't care. And our main character, Sal, sometimes I liked them, but a lot of times they also felt really flat. And overall, their personality was pretty flat. Like, all I can really say about them is that they're gender fluid. And beyond that, their personality is pretty much a cliche fantasy YA protagonist. Like, think Selena Sardathian from Throne of Glass, and that's pretty close right there, you know. Like, there's a lot of protagonists in YA fantasy, it seems like, that, you know, they've lost their homeland and they want revenge on the reason they lost their homeland. Like, I can think of several: Throne of Glass, The Orphan Queen, probably a lot of others too, and this sort of feels in that vein, and it was very predictable. Like, you kind of knew the outcome of things when they were happening. I didn't enjoy this book as much as I wanted to. I gave it 3.5 stars. Now, me, it's pretty easy to get a 4 or 5 star rating out of me. I tend to, like, for me, 3 stars means that something bugged me about it so much it was just a pain to get through. 3.5, you know, it wasn't painful to read. It wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't a great book either. It was kind of an okay book. It was a readable book. As for our main character being gender fluid, I mean, if you're looking for a book with a gender fluid protagonist, here it is. But, you know, that's about the most interesting thing about this book, probably. The most original idea here. I'm not the person you should be asking whether or not it was handled well or not. I did notice that, besides the synopsis, it wasn't really brought up until, like, chapter 5 or 7. Like, before that, you know, we don't actually get any description of our main character. I think it was a solid 10 chapters before I knew what their hair color was. You know, there just was a lot of description that wasn't there. Like, some characters in some places got more description than others. Like, there were some that you could picture pretty well, but there was a lot that just sort of felt blank. And, you know, we're supposed to, you know, root for Sal to win this competition, you know, the auditions to become Opal for the Queen's Left Hand. But, you know, they're just not qualified. You know, honestly, it'd be like if I applied to be an assassin, actually. It'd be like if I applied to be an assassin. I wouldn't be a very good assassin, y'all. There's also a romantic subplot in this book, and I really wanted to like it. I am a sucker for romance. I don't read romance books by themselves, but I'm a sucker for a romantic subplot. And I did like it at first, but at some point it started feeling really forced and kind of it didn't feel very real. It just felt like the author really wanted these characters together now. Like right now, even if it didn't really make sense. The world building isn't too bad. I think it was a pretty interesting world, but the thing is, it was hard to care about. Much like everything else in this book, it was hard to care about because even though we got details on it, somehow I didn't care. Like, something about there just wasn't enough there to make me care. Like, ultimately, this is the summation of this whole book, was there wasn't really enough there to make me care about it a lot. You know, I wanted to, but it wasn't quite there. If I had a chance to buy this book, I probably would. It's got a pretty cover. I would probably put it on my shelf. So I didn't hate this book at all. I just was kind of disappointed by it. Like, I would happily read this, well, maybe not happily. I'd definitely read any sequels that come out in the series. It definitely feels like there's going to be a sequel. Like, it kind of, not quite, well, yeah, kind of a cliffhanger at the end. It definitely leaves it very open for a second book. So I'll definitely read that. But ultimately, this book wasn't as good as, you know, it could have been. It feels like it could have been a bit better if it had been just a little more detailed, more description. It just fell short, and it felt short. It could have been longer, which is not a thing I usually say about a fantasy book. most fantasy books, you know, you're like, well, this could have been 100 pages shorter. This book could have been 100 pages longer, I'd say, if it had just taken a breath and thought about what it was doing a little bit more. The book itself, not necessarily the author, but the book itself, I feel like could have thought about itself a little more. That didn't make sense. Anyway, the point is, I gave this book 3 stars. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it to anyone. If you are looking for a book with a gender-fluid protagonist, particularly a fantasy book, here it is. If you like assassins, give it a go. So that is my review on Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller, which came out yesterday. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you again soon, I hope.